Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guests, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight we are going to be talking about those thoughts that go around in our head, what comes through our consciousness. As my son always says, Mom, you just speak as a stream of consciousness. Where is it coming from? Where is it going? Are you just putting it out there? Isn't that truly what we are all about as energetic beings? We are sensing, feeling, knowing. Things are always going through our minds and our thoughts, just as we call it mind chatter. Mind chatter is when we put up a filter and says, whoops, this is the way you go to the left, you go to the right, perhaps I'm going to block this out. What are we talking about when we have a sensation? We talk about our intuition, perhaps that knowing or that deep sense of, I'm going to dodge left and not right. Where does it come from? What is it all about? How do we filter it through? How do we make sense of it? Are we holding on to the human and we say it has to be validated? We have to give it a name, a reason, and a rhyme, and show me again so I will believe. Perhaps we are now evolving through the time of our human evolution, where we are picking up a little more spiritual connection, a little more essence into the cosmos and into the universe, and maybe shedding some of these filters, some of these knowings, validations that we are holding on to so tightly. In other words, how do we expand in our knowing into our consciousness in this time? How do we navigate our world? Today, my guest is Anne Edgecliff. Her book is Transmutation and the Human Consciousness. Anne, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jeanette. I am so honored to be a guest on your podcast.
So glad to have you today, Anne, because your topic is just so timely, I think. So for so many people, they're saying, it's kind of scaring me. I have a sense, I have a knowing, my intuition's opening up. And so many people are saying, Pop, where did this stuff come from? And really, your book is definitely a guidebook to be able to say, perhaps take this little journey with me, and it's not so scary. Yes?
Yes, yes. It is definitely meant to calm people's fears and any anxiety surrounding the potential possibilities of what happens when these bodies of ours say, your time here is done and your next journey is about to begin.
Yeah. You know, as I've shared over, I think it's over 15 years now, I've always said that we're truly just like this little ball of glitter out in the cosmos. All of a sudden we intersect with another line, ancestral lineage, and we become who we are. We download this information, and that's the life we play out. And then we're finished, we kind of pop out the other side. Just as you go through a black hole, you pop out the other side another similar ball of glitter, and that was just a chapter in your book. We are eternal souls. Do you think perhaps that if we can recognize that, maybe so, we will say, oh, this is awesome, and how can we transmute, as you say, transfigure? I think we could use any word for it. How do we have this exploration, perhaps?
Yes. The thought of, I think, us leaving our human bodies and delving into a completely different set of consciousness or a different environment, it is, to some people, it could be freeing, and to other people, it could be scary. So I love the image of what you just described about considering our consciousness as balls of glitter. And that ball of glitter it is always there. It's either within us, and then it travels along its own journey when it's done within our bodies. I absolutely love that.
I think so many times, as I've had so many near-death experiences this lifetime, definitely over 100 to date, and I think of it as I transpose myself. I go back and forth. Many times people say I go to sleep. I woke up. Oh, my goodness, all of a sudden I feel like, where am I? What am I done? And they get up and they're almost interacting within the story that they brought from their dreams as an out-of-body experience. Even still, I know for myself, living here in New Orleans, I can walk down many streets or be in many places or locations, and I'll say, all of a sudden a whole story will start playing within my consciousness of who I was, where I've been, what it was all about at any time in history. Once we start opening up any of these aspects of our knowing, we say, oh my goodness, what do I do now? And I think that's where your book is very important. It's a guidebook that says, have no fear. I'm here to guide you. This is the way we go through this. This is how we might see it. And then you can form your own story and your own way of being able to navigate from there further. This little bridge that we kind of need is very essential, because you don't want to be in the abyss all the time by yourself floating along with your little glitter shoes on. You want to be able to say, guide me along the way. And I think that's what we're talking about today. Who are the guides? How do they help us? And how do we hear them, perhaps?
Yes. And each guide has a very different method and a very different way to reach out to people, and a very different type of way to proceed in terms of what they believe us humans would be most comfortable with. And what's interesting is that each guide came with very, very specific instructions in terms of this is the number that resonates with me for the purposes of this book, and the people who would also resonate with those numbers is exactly how a guide or guides, plural, get chosen by people. So it matches essentially with numerology and frequencies what we are comfortable with. And through the beginning meditation with the narrator, Anubis, people are matched up with the guides who would seem to naturally be matched with certain frequencies, and the people picking those frequencies.
Yeah, I think that's so vitally important, too, because sometimes people will say, do I need to give up my beliefs? Do I need to give up my religion? Do I need to give up my way in which I see the world? Because I think that's very important. A lot of the guides you have in here, one is crow magic, another might be the witch, another might be an angel, it might be Uriel, it might be Papa Legba. And when we think about this, we say, ooh, but that feels funny to me. I'm not willing to go down that path. We say that isn't the path that was meant for you then. Or maybe that was a path from your other lifetime. And, I think this is really interesting, too, Anne, is that a lot of times, I work with all realms, all dimensions, all, light and dark. And what I've also said to them, oh, it feels ooh to you. And I'll say, oh, that's awesome. What is it saying? And then they'll start opening up the door of the darkness in which they have shielded themselves from. Because until that darkness or that shielding is opened up, sometimes you can't get to the next step, so to speak. A lot of times we carry, I just thought as a vision, you're walking around with all these pouches around your waist, each carrying its own story. And until you be able to look at it and say, what was that about? That was awesome, irregardless of what it felt like, what it was labeled as, or how dark and deep or suffering or pain it might be. it still was something that you faced through. And that is important, don't you think?
Yes, especially given, so I wanted to have a very specific array of guides stemming from different religions, different cultures, because it seems like in today's ways that people maybe think or act, there are very specific religious philosophies, and sometimes people end up feeling pigeonholed by a particular religion or growing up a certain way and saying, this is how I've learned to define religion, this is how I've learned to define the afterlife. And understanding that every religion has the essential messages of peace, love, kindness, being kind to one another. And once you get to that core, everybody's beliefs in religious systems, religious beliefs, spirituality, the takeaway should be considered the same. So no matter where someone is on the planet and picking up this particular guidebook, because perhaps someone is still thinking to themselves, oh, gee, well, I really, I'm Catholic, so I don't want to do this meditation in the beginning. I want to specifically go to chapter 1, Archangel Uriel. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine, because that's another piece of what this book was designed to do, is to perhaps potentially still then, once that person reads through that first chapter, maybe that person will go back and say, you know what, I'm willing now to engage in this particular meditation from the narrator and just see what number actually does come up for me, and then see if actually that does match who I am, what I'm thinking, and the path that maybe I want to be on. So yes, it is, I think, essential that in today's culture, today's way of thinking, that people maybe not pigeonhole themselves into one particular religion or spiritual practice, and to open themselves and open their minds and hearts to more than one.
Yes, because also, too, as I work a lot with patients, with shamanic work, it's all about being able to bring the soul back together. And if you look at it, you may say, I may be Catholic, as I was raised Catholic in this lifetime. If you may go through the Catholic part, and then you say, I may want to check out another guide. The other guide may be that part of your soul from another lifetime, as we say, the ball of glitter. We have to remember, this lifetime is only this chapter. This is not the you. Yeah. This is a body, a story, a housing, an identity, a validation of what you've construed to be this lifetime. It isn't the you. It's so interesting because I distinctly remember I'd gone to an event, I think it was a few years ago, and I had flown, which I don't really fly, and I wasn't feeling well. And when I got there, I pretty much was in an extraordinary amount of back pain. I really simply couldn't stand up. It was a problem. And then I had sat next to someone I hadn't seen for like 20 years, and they said, oh, how are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm doing awesome. And they looked at me and they said, what are you talking about? How can you say that you're doing awesome? You can't even stand up. You can't even pick up the baby. You can't even walk. I said, I am doing awesome. It's my body, my vehicle, who is having a few challenges right now. And I think that's very important to be able to say, can we have a different conceptual idea of our reality and of our experience? Because that's very important. Our reality is something that we're saying we're putting a label on it because we don't want to let other people see us or know us for our differences. Our experience may be feeling pain or suffering or saying you're okay, or feeling darkness or lightness or dancing or whatever it might be, you see? But once we put that validation on it, we are wedged into a space and time So really your book is saying, take whichever is speaking to you now and heal that part of your heart and your soul. And if something else, you set the book to the side. You leave it there. One day you'll be guided. Set your hand on top of it. Feel what comes to you. Open up a book to any page. And that may be just what you need to heal another part of your soul, perhaps. And that's your true shamanic journey.
Yes. And you said that so beautifully, that understanding and almost giving your mind up to the process and letting go of specifically held beliefs that maybe conformed you to think and act a certain way. And in opening yourself up to understanding that there is more than one reality, more than one way of thinking, you've had more than one life, and integrating some of those concepts, that leads us as humans to live a much more balanced and understanding life, and for us to be able to say when we leave this particular shell, you know what, I really made the most of my time here. I healed a lot of my past wounds. I healed, and you had brought up earlier, some ancestral wounds that at this point, some kind of potentially biological karma has been cleaned up for the next generation or for myself in the next incarnation. And that, I think, is so important and such a great message, that in us understanding that and thinking that way, it does nothing other than elevate us and elevates us into a space of kindness and forgiveness and perhaps even connection to our ancestors, and understanding, you know, I had a really poor relationship with this particular person in this lifetime. But in those connections, you may also have a deeper understanding of, oh, wow, but I didn't understand that this person was going through A, B, C, and D, and I do want to clear up that biological karma for the next generation, because I actually have an understanding now of why this person acted the way that they did.
But also, to the idea, you know, I've had one of those relationships in my life, and it wasn't about always going out and trying to fix it, try to change it. I've got to give forgiveness. I've got to give repentance. I have to have regrets, blah, 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 blah. That, you know, that yada, yada, yada in your head, you know, so to speak. It's like, just shut up already. But I think also, to the idea is that I listened. And I allowed them to have their own experience. But I did not engage in it. And that is the difference. It was a very close relative that people will say, how dare you do that? And I said, because I allowed them to have their own experience. I disengaged because it was not that. Because I think this is the biggest misgiving that humans are really, I hope that they open up to at this time, is that there's no such thing as ownership. My father, my mother, my kids, my job, my money, my this, my that. They are another human being that has been birthed into a position, and you can explore that with them for a few years, but then you let it go. They are their own soul and spirit. And so many times people will say that, no, there's no way, that's not going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And then they get stuck because when the loved ones pass, they're still feeling, oh, well, my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, they passed, and how terrible, and da-da-da. And then they're stuck with grief and loss. Because they are still tethered to the human dogma of the story. And I think truly what guides really bring you to, which I've shared with people so many times at end of life, I said, honey, let it go. They're gone. Let it be. And they're like, no, that's not going to happen. And I could say distinctly, definitely, and I'm sure you've seen this, Anne, is that less than probably 0.0002% of people within the realm right now can get this concept. But once you do, there's no going back. You exist from a totally different world, and you see things so differently. You cannot even conceive of having a conversation even with people within that other realm. It's like, as I've shared on the show before, you know when you had AM radio in your car and you go through the mountains and, you know, the stations would filter on and off, and that would be how you go through life. Well, all of a sudden one day, FM radio came along and you had to flip a switch on your car dash to get to FM. Well, you couldn't listen to FM if you were in you couldn't listen to AM if you were in FM. So pretty much I have flipped the switch and I've been in FM, and I couldn't conceive of AM. It doesn't show up for me. So the guides are taking you on a journey to say, flip the switch to FM and let's have some exploration time. That's all they're asking.
I love that.
Right?
Yes. And the scenario you had just described, it
was loaded.
Very
yeah, I know.
I couldn't help but be reminded of, so growing up, I grew up Catholic also, and I had the biggest issue that I always had in my religion classes was, well, if God made everything, what made God? Because in my mind, time was so linear, and that's just how it was. Time was linear. And then when I was 13, I lost consciousness, and I left my body. I had strep throat, and growing up I was very sickly, and I had a lot of times in which my mom would say, do you have strep throat again? I'd say, I don't know, but my throat hurts, and I always had strep throat. So there was a time when I was 13, and my throat started hurting, and I decided I'm going to just hide this fact from my parents because I don't want to get in trouble for getting sick again. So as the time went on, my fever ended up at 104.8, and I completely lost consciousness and left my body. And during that experience, I had encountered I saw the white light, and I had encountered the white light, and I had a conversation with this white light. And in that, I say conversation, but there was no speaking, there was no talking. It was all communication through feelings and emotions directly to and from my heart chakra. And it was during that moment that I realized my question about, well, if God made everything, what made God, was silly, because it was in that encounter that I understood that time is not linear. Time is circular. There is no end. There is no beginning. It's just a perfect circle. And it is very difficult to put that into words and to describe to people, because then some people might say, well, there's still a beginning to a circle because you have to draw it. You start at one point and you end at another. And it's just one of those things. Like you said, it is difficult to explain, but once you encounter it and once you engage and once you have that deep understanding, there's no going back.
You flip the switch. Once you flip that switch, there aren't words, and that's exactly what it's supposed to be. There are no words. You are then operating from an energy frequency versus from the dogma, beliefs, and validation of a human story, right?
Yes, 100%. And it was through that interaction so I'd had experiences before that particular experience, but it was after that experience that I had come to a deeper understanding of the universe, energies, what my questions were, and that my questions were, like I said, hate to put another label on it, but, quote, silly, that label.
Right.
And it was after that experience then, because given the being Catholic and growing up where I grew up, it was difficult also to try and explain this to other people. So then I got used to hiding some of what I had experienced and what I could see, what I could hear. And it wasn't until much later in my lifetime that I became comfortable with sharing this particular side of myself. So I think there are a lot of labels that we generate them as humans. It's just kind of what we are unfortunately perhaps predispositioned to do. So in clearing those labels up and combining that with flipping the switch, I think we get much further in our journeys and much more understanding and open to something like transmutation in the human consciousness and picking a guide and asking this guide to interact with you.
But in actuality, Anne, you and I were supposed to be forerunners. We were supposed to be the guides. We were supposed to be the all-knowing because that's what it was. Here's the difference, is that if you truly look at it in history, people have been doing this throughout evolution. It's just different times and in different ways. They've explored the particles of being human within a spiritual sense. Because if you look at it, let's look back at the time of, the Salem witches. They all tried to do it too. They were doing it a different way with a different language, right?
Yeah.
And that's the way it was. And then they were, killed or whatever for that aspect. So whoever was around then within a soul essence of energy, they at that time are holding a fragment of that. So let's look at another time. I know for myself, I can distinctly remember I was sitting here in the chair one day and all I could see was this Phoenician. And I'm going, what is this all about? And I said, oh, that's me. I got it. And I just knew it. I can close my eyes now. I can see the picture perfectly. I know exactly what it was. I have a son. His name was Alex. One day he said, asked me a question. I said, oh, you were supposed to be Alexander the Great. And then one day, several decades later, I was looking up Phoenicians and Alexander the Great. Don't you know? I saw a picture there, and it talked about healers, which is what I do. And it had the connection to Alexander the Great, this healing sign, and there was a Phoenician right next to it. And I said, oh, so he and I were there before. So I think the idea is that, let's talk about this for a minute, Anne, is that when you start getting messages, do you start running the other way like a chicken? Do you start going and hiding underneath your bed and saying, that isn't true, how dare you? Or do you say, no, regardless of if it is dark or light or hard or easy or a struggle or a challenge or a gift or a diamond in the rough, so to speak, do you just listen and just say, I'm going to breathe it in, I'm going to hold it for a moment in time and see what happens? I think once we take the next step and start categorizing it, then that's when we shut down sometimes our channel in being able to receive. Perhaps?
Yes. And I know for me, you had mentioned dark energies and working with them. What my understanding of them is that also that's what they are. That's what they were meant to be. And we label them, our human mind labels them as these are, quote, negative, these are, quote, dark. But they're just being what and who they were designed to be. So I always welcome all the energies, even if and when it's dark, because in experiencing even those connections, there's always something to learn. There's always more to learn and more to experience, and being able to engage in those kinds of interactions led me deeper into my understanding of, like I said, these are just what and who they were designed and meant to be. It's just what they are and who they are. And as humans in our world of duality, we need that. Without the dark, we couldn't classify the light. Without the quote unquote what we call bad, we couldn't classify the good. So because of that spectrum, when we experience something that we would categorize as bad or negative, it brings us all the much more joy and happiness when we experience the exact opposite of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think also, too, Anne, being myself, that I flip the switch, and I don't see the dark and the light, but it is necessary for some people and the plane in which they are in. So we have to recognize that. Not everybody is in the space I'm in or you're in. Everybody is in their own space. So we say, what does it feel like to you? How does it resonate within your body? And what emotion does it draw out? Those three things are so vitally important. And once you can get there, then you say, okay, now what do we do next? What do we feel next? How do we experience it? And how do we release it? Because once you release it, then you have to come back in and you have to heal the space in which it was left. So many times, I look at people and they say, oh, release it, let it go, blah, blah, blah. And that's all they do. What ends up happening, again, going back to the shamanic journey, you end up with a void in your space. You end up with a void and a hole in your energy being. And really, if you don't go back in, and people will say, well, I need to heal it. You're not healing it. What you're doing is you're going in and you're filling energy within your space and your time. I always say, I want you to go in and just sprinkle out, have a lot of jars of glitter. Pick up some pink glitter and just go outside, cast it over your head and just walk through it. What it does, it just energetically fills in your energy space. Now, if you were talking to a witch, she would say, what you've done is you've now just cleaned and cleansed your chakras, so to speak, or you're going in, you're clearing out your aura, another person might say. Or another would say, what you're doing is you're casting up a protection site. So it's really about us saying all of these words and these labels have been used for eons.
Yes.
And not to be afraid of them, perhaps?
Yes. And one of the things that I love to do when I've cleared some houses of some, quote, negative energies, and after I do that, I like to go through the house and then do a very particular ritual in which we then bring in all the positive. So exactly like you said, you fill the space with something that you want, something that will bring you joy and happiness. And you especially need to do that, like you said, when you are clearing a negative within your body. Because, so I had a hysterectomy a number of years ago, and I go to my mentor for her to do Reiki on me. And after that particular procedure, which was probably the most difficult surgical procedure I've had to have. And afterwards, because there was so much space in there, through Reiki, my mentor had filled it with what positive energy, filling it with kind of like the chakras coming down and the chakras coming back up, and filling that space with positive energy from where those organs had been. And I think, like you said, it is definitely something that people think, once the bad is taken out, the quote bad is taken out, we're all good. And you're halfway there, I would say. I say you're all good, you're halfway there. There's one more step to do so that, just like you said, you are filling that space. Yep.
But also, too, I think, Ann, is that when you are having conversations with your guide, it is about also filling in the space in your humanness. In other words, let's say you have a conversation with maybe Uriel, and you're learning some spiritual senses, and you're able to hear and sense when your own self is in danger, or perhaps maybe when you should go left or right, or whatever that might be. It also, too, is to understand that you're leaving imprints behind you. You're leaving people and things behind you. You may say, I'm making a better choice for myself, but you might be leaving people and disconnecting from people and things that you had done before. But you have to understand that sometimes people always say, oh, but you're doing it for yourself. Honey, it's all about self this, self that. And I'm going, oh, goodness. But we're all part of the same energy. I don't know how you can see it otherwise. Again, I'm looking at it from my FM side, But I would say, isn't that awesome? I use the word awesome all the time. Isn't that awesome? I'm giving them some more time to be able to, and energy, to be able to have for their own self. And isn't that awesome? I think, like people after a divorce will say, I want my energy back. I'm getting my energy back from that abusive person. And I'll say, you don't want that energy back. That energy is a fragment. It has been altered already. What you're doing is you are now increasing your own light, your own energy from inside. Might that be the key to all of this work that we're doing? When you get help from a guide, you're increasing your light from inside. When you go out and you're releasing others, you're increasing your own light from inside. When you see it or you feel it or you sense it and it feels good or it doesn't feel good, and you have that engagement, you're still increasing your own energy. Isn't that perhaps what we're looking for?
Yes, very much so. And I think that too, we as humans think about certain things in isolated incidents and not thinking about certain things in the long term, or how a certain negative experience that you've had at one point in time in your life could lead to you having something positive later. So, for example, when I was 16, I had almost gotten into a car accident. And the reason for that was I was driving, and it was dark and it was raining, and there was a left turn that I had to take at one point, and I had heard something saying, go through the light, keep going, don't make the left turn here. But I dismissed it, and I said, oh, no, it's quicker to get home this way. But then while I was making that left-hand turn, the car skidded, and I came within, I can't even tell you how close I was to hitting a light pole. But at that point in time, I also heard, take your hands off the steering wheel. So I did, and the car straightened out. So for years and years, I thought about that incident, thinking, why didn't I just listen to that voice? And the next time I hear that voice, I'm going to listen to it. And then fast forward, years later, I'm in my 30s, and I was about to take my dog out for a walk. And I had heard in my head, I had a taser just because of walking sometimes at night with my dog. I'd heard in my head, take your taser. And I thought, oh, no, that's silly. And I took a step, and I could not move forward anymore. And I heard it again, take the taser. So I thought to myself, you know what, maybe there's a coyote out there. I told myself, next time I heard this voice, I'm going to listen. So I took my taser. And had I not taken my taser, there was a van that had come around the corner, and someone got out. They were trying to approach me. They saw I had a taser. They backed off, got back into their van, and drove away. So I was so thankful for that experience in which you come full circle to thinking, I was perhaps supposed to not listen to the voice at that point in time, because I needed to make 100% sure that when I heard it this next time, I was going to listen to it. So I think that in giving yourself over to understanding your own intuition, understanding that even in, like you said, a divorce, a negative circumstance, understanding what you've been through and using those as building blocks, and like you said, not wanting to put those, like, bring back that energy, but to understand that those experiences were given to you most likely by yourself in choosing certain people to come here with and to interact with and to learn from. Perhaps your lesson from all that was to learn to transmute that type of energy and you're transmuting it into something more beneficial for yourself.
Well, you know what I think also, too, when people have these instances, it's truly about being able to say, do I need to label it or validate it? Do I need to be able to give it a purpose or a reason? I know for myself, I've had tons of those. I'd be driving down the street, and then all of a sudden, a car comes across and just totals my car, and I'm going, oof. Okay, well, why did I not get the message then? Should I have sped up a little bit more? Should I have not gone on that street? And the answer was, it just was. Yes. It was placement in time. Yes. That's it. Yes. Yes. And I think the idea that so many times when patients come to me, why did I get cancer? Why am I sick? Why am I dying? Why am I this? Why am I that? And I said, because it is. It just is because it is. I think once we start saying what is the reason behind it all the time, we end up with piling on more regrets and guilt and more, as I call it, schmutz that we're going to have to heal in the next we're going to have to heal in the next lifetime. And I'll say, give it wings, honey. It sucked. It was bad. I hit it. It was horrible. I almost died. I almost this. Yeah. Man, it was disgusting. I mean, I even look back last year. I was so sick last year, I had to use a wheelchair for several months. And I'm thinking, one day, I just said, you know what? I don't think I want this to be my story. And I decided, okay, I might only be able to walk 2 or 3 steps or 4, but I'll take the 1 or 2 or 3 steps or 4. And now I'm up to maybe 10 or 15. But that's okay. And I think the idea is that we get so stuck in all of the story of it that we can't see the forest through the trees, so to speak. I look back at, people who I've had relationships with, and I'll say, oh, that was awesome. I was there to help him. Look at what I did. Look at how he changed. Oh, I was there because I was only supposed to birth these children. Isn't that awesome? That was my job. That's it. And could it be as simple as one split second that you were supposed to have a trajectory with either a person, place, or thing, and that's it? Perhaps?
Yes. And I think that what you just described is the perfect alignment of being present. Because when you're present, you're not thinking of, oh, what are the consequences? What's going to happen with this? Oh, how am I going to feel later? Or reliving certain things which could then potentially raise your anxiety or your sadness or your depression. And one of the parts of Archangel Uriel's advice and explanation of being completely conscious and present in that consciousness is exactly what you described. It just is. Sometimes being present is enjoying the moment and not thinking about something negative that's happened, or this was taken from me, or I feel so sad about this, because then that in turn potentially increases a person's anxiety or loneliness or sadness, when just being present, you can be very, very happy being present.
Because the idea of all of that other stuff is control, and that's ownership, and that's all those tether lines again. When you're present, you just don't have those kinds of ideas, so to speak, And I think about it so many times, when I speak to patients, at end of life, and we're talking about it, and they'll say, well, I'm so worried, or this is going to happen, or blah, 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 and they go down the storyline. And I had said to one woman, I says, what are you so afraid of? She says, well, my partner, they're not going to be able to pay the bills. We just got this new house. I said, honey, when you walk through that door, you don't ever pay another bill.
Right.
She said, I know, but I can't leave them. I says, you're going. There's no such thing as bills. And she said, well, how do I do it? And I had her fold her hands one on top of the other, and I just take your index finger and flick it off. When that energy comes to you, just flick your finger. Let it go.
I love that.
Just keep flicking the energy away. One day I went to talk to her. She says, she hasn't been around me for a while. I says, are you flicking the energy away? She said, yeah. She should not bother me about it anymore. I said, exactly.
I love
It's as simple as shifting the energy. Can you shift the energy and see that? Sometimes people will say, but I've had so many things happen to me. And, there's one I always talk about is words to kick to the curb, I have these, I talk about them. And one is, you're here to learn a lesson. And I'm going, I'm not here to learn anything, honey. I'm here to experience. That's it. Because when you think about the word, I'm here to learn a lesson, oh, you didn't learn your lesson. And what do you think of? Immediately it triggers, you did something right or wrong, right?
Correct. Potentially
but
punishment or reward.
Right. Just like school, you didn't learn it. You're going to have to go back to school and do it again. And I'm thinking, no, I'm here to experience, If I keep going through the light and I keep getting in a wreck, I might be here for me one time. I might be here so that other person doesn't drink anymore. I might be here because I need to put a different light here. I might be here because maybe the traffic pattern has to change. I might be here to be a vehicle to change the energy in that space. Simple as that.
I love it.
Right?
Yes. Changing energy within a particular space can be vital to changing how people feel when they walk into that space.
Right.
And that can change someone's perspective then, and just like you were saying, then that person could then change someone else's perspective.
Yes. Yep.
Going onward and onward to infinity. in terms of, essentially, it's almost like paying it forward. You change someone else's perspective, that person changes the next person's, that person changes the next person's, and before you know it, there are so many people who are included in that little bit of change that the chain reaction is, use your word, completely awesome.
Right, because just as I shared with you before the show, the tilde, it's about being able to create the wave of change and let it be. Absolutely.
And the more people who understand that and figure that out, or not figure that out, which is completely valid and fine.
Yep, absolutely.
In figuring that out, I do think it gives people so much more clarity and almost like an aha moment. Like, I get it. I get that.
Yeah.
And that's powerful. That's change, and it's powerful.
That's the purpose. We're here to shift energy. And, I think your book definitely is a guidebook to be able to say, I'm going to take what I need from it. I'll set it to the side. I may pick it up a day, week, month, or year later. I might find another page or another word that might guide me. Just as our show today, we've shared many stories, many experiences, many thoughts, and be able to say, oh, that feels something in my gut. I feel like something in my head. Oh, that really PO'd me. Oh, that really set me off. And isn't that wonderful? Because that truly is about being able to say, how can we till the soil to be able to fly? And that's what I always talk about. It's time to dance into the ethers. So I thank you so much for sharing with us today to be able to dance in the ethers, because I think your book is definitely a guide to be able to do that, yes?
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. I so appreciate being on your show, your podcast, and I am so grateful. I'm just so grateful. Thank you.
And can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work?
Yes, the book Transmutation in the Human Consciousness, there is a website, AnnEdgecliff.com, and you can purchase the book from that website or on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. There is an audio book that is set to come out soon, so if people are not interested in turning the pages or reading it that way, while there is also an ebook out, the audio book is set to release shortly.
Very good. Well, Ann, it was such a pleasure to have you with us here today. I think many people find lots of inspiration and perhaps maybe heal their own space and time. So I thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you again.
If you'd like to find out more information about Anne Edgecliff, again, the book is Transmutation and the Human Consciousness. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to her website for more information. And it is about being able to say whatever's passing through, whatever you say, ooh, oh, gosh, what is that? Just take that little tendril, take that little thread, follow it through, see where it guides you to, and perhaps you can weave an all-new matrix, an all-new tapestry of your life. You just never know what's out there for you. Let it go. Say, oh, gosh, I don't know what it's all about, and enjoy the experience. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher. Until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit drjeanettegallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.